What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the channel. And folks, it is time for part 2 of a 3-part series here in WardyNYM, where I'm breaking down 5 way too early Mets trade targets leading up to this year's trade deadline, which is over a month away at the time of recording this. And from our first video last week, as you see here, links down below as always, make sure to watch it after this one in case you missed it. That was centered around position players, so naturally today's discussion is centered around starting pitching targets. So that is what I'll be deep diving for you all. 5 starting pitchers, the likelihood, unlikelihood of the Mets pursuing and or landing them. Have the Mets had any previous connections or current interest in any of these starters at this juncture, and the overall impact that these starters could have for the Mets should they land either of them by this year's trade deadline, and so much more. So as always, folks, make sure you stay all the way till the end of the video. Follow the details and all my thoughts on these 5 starting pitchers and their potential impact on the Mets should they land them via trade. As always, folks, if you found yourself enjoying this kind of Mets content and you want to see more great Mets content like this, don't hesitate from smashing that like and subscribe button, sharing this video with your friends, on the notification bell, all those great things. Thank you all so much for the continued support, folks. Now let's jump right into today's video. Starting things off at number 5, we have 29-year-old right-hand starting pitcher for the Colorado Rockies and Chad Kuhl. And before you wonder why aren't we starting this discussion with an elite pitcher, you have to realize, folks, that's not the matter of if the Mets are going to acquire starting pitching by this year's trade deadline, but rather to what degree. And that will be completely indicative on the current status by then of the rotation, the health, especially with Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. How are they going to be looking? How many starts will they have under their belt prior to this year's deadline? Those will be factors. But with the hypothetical scenario where the Mets are comfortable knowing that all those guys are healthy and say can't go all in for the bigger starters available because either teams are betting better for some of the other guys that we'll be discussing shortly, and they want to get more depth, solely depth, because of the likes of a Trevor Williams type player, a long reliever slash a number 5 star, depending on injuries and consistencies. That's where a guy like Chad Kuhl comes into play. He's an intriguing option for all competitive teams out there by this year's trade deadline as a depth fit, as having a career best year in his first year with the Rockies after spending his previous 4 years with the Pittsburgh Pirates after signing a $1.3 million deal this past offseason. Kuhl repping around a 3.5 ERA, expected ERA over 4. All of his other advanced numbers, which just tell you what he can really control as a pitcher, aren't the prettiest but not the worst. They're just directly in hand with his normal career norms here. But someone like Kuhl, when you look at his arsenal, has a sinker, the slider, the curveball, changeup, and fastball mix. That off-speed stuff has been his bread and butter to a higher degree than it has been in recent years. The slider has been his strikeout pitch, high swing and miss rate, highest K rate by far there for him. And the overall off-speed slash breaking pitches is where he's had opponent batting average of right around 200. The sinker, the fastball, not looking great. Not a lot of life because not a lot of velo and not a lot of spin rate on those pitches. But that is a trend that you will see with the majority of the starters discussed in today's video. So keep that in mind. The off-speed has been the X-factor pitches there for Chad Kuhl, and definitely an intriguing option for someone who has had his best year in Coors, arguably the hardest park to pitch in MLB. Has a 2.5 ERA thus far away and over 4 ERA, but that goes directly in hand with the altitude differences. I'm a firm believer in that. We see that not just with pitchers. John Gray was a great example in recent years with the Rockies, pitch better at home than he did away. I fully expect that once he's dealt, should he be dealt, wherever he's going to land after a quick adjustment, we'll get back to really a balance between those home and away splits, probably around a 3.5 ERA if I had to assume at this juncture. But no less, a guy like Chad Kuhl can definitely bring plenty depth for the Mets should they look to acquire specifically that by this year's trade deadline. So definitely a key guy to keep an eye on. Here at number 4, we have 31-year-old veteran southpaw for the Texas Rangers and Martin Perez. And what makes him so interesting on today's video, folks, is that he is the anomaly of a starter. This guy has been in the league for now 11 MLB seasons and is having far and away his best year to date. And how is he doing it, right? Because he has to this point at just over 2 ERA, but the best part is that all of his advanced numbers, again, the numbers that he can control as a pitcher, which tell you more about evaluating the pitcher, have been absolutely superb. Some of the best numbers in all of baseball, not just in the AL, but across all starters at the MLB level this year. But with the 2 X factors for Perez this year, which have given him great success, are 1, the walk rate is the lowest he's had at this point at the time of recording this, with just over 2 walks per 9 innings, over 7 strikeouts per 9 innings. But that home run rate is a big thing. Gave up just under 20 bombs with the Boston Red Sox last year as a starter slash reliever. This year with the Texas Rangers has only given up 2 measly home runs at this point through 15 16 starts. This guy has been ridiculous. I love his arsenal. Again, not crazy velo, but a nice healthy mix of the sinker, the changeup, the cutter, the fastball, the curveball. And that sinker, changeup, cutter, which is what he utilizes the most right now, he's had a good mix of around 20 strikeouts between each of those pitches respectively. When you look at the fastball, the curveball, those pitches haven't worked as well for him this year. But again, his top 3 pitches that he utilizes the most, he's have right around an opponent batting average between 2 to 250. So that's really strong. Perez, an anomaly of a year, but he is proving that this isn't a fluke. This is not something based on great defense behind him and just getting lucky. No, Perez is having a phenomenal year, and unless something drastically changes, which of course there's always risk of that happening, he's quite literally having a Kyle Gibson year that Kyle Gibson had with the Rangers last year. Remember, veteran right-hander, had a sub-2 ERA for the first half plus of the year, then got traded to Philadelphia Phillies. He's been solid for them, but not the same pitcher. But really out of nowhere, just had an anomaly first half, and we're seeing that now with Perez. It's going to be interesting to see if the Rangers will be willing to part with someone like him, because like Cole, he's a rental, only on a 1 year, $4 million deal. A free agent after this season is not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and could be a bargain type move that the Mets make should the Rangers be willing to sell, because again, they're around a 500 team right now. They're going to be more borderline with being a seller or buyer versus more clear-cut teams like the Pirates and others. No less, Perez, definitely keep an eye on this guy. I think he's awfully intriguing. Definitely can add depth again in this rotation, along with a fellow southpaw, David Pearson. Could add depth in the bullpen if need be, if everyone's healthy. Is not going to cost you prospects to the same magnitude that you will do for other guys that we'll be discussing shortly. And when looking at his baseball savant numbers, folks, he's in the 95th percentile barrel percentage. No one's barreling the ball off of Martin Perez at this point. Expected slugging, expected ERA, expected WOBA, and walk percentage are all among the better ones, elite in all of baseball right now. Loving what I'm seeing Perez. He faces the Mets this weekend at the time recording this, so hopefully he doesn't do well then. But overall, lots to like about this man. An intriguing option, and definitely a sneaky one, no less, should the Mets go all in for some crucial depth by this year's trade deadline. Here at number 3, folks, we are starting the discussion of players that the Mets have shown recent interest in over the past couple months, starting with 27-year-old right-hand starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. We know they're sellers this year. That is a guarantee. To what degree, we'll find out. And Mahle is going to cost you more than the previous 2 starters because he's not a free agent until 2024. Is arbitration eligible at the end of this year. The Reds, do they want to pay that arbitration? Of course not. They're like the Oakland A's in that aspect. So he will be made available at the right price. Yes, he's going to cost you a little bit, but still not to the magnitude of a Luis Castillo. And what I love about Mahle is, one, the Mets, they've been in on him for the past half year. They showed interest during the offseason in him. They even pursued him along with Frankie Montas right around the beginning of the season when Jacob deGrom first went down with his injury. Again, nothing happened because it was too early in the year to make a deal, but they've been in tune with him. And Mahle, yes, he has a 4.5 ERA, but that means nothing because when looking at the numbers that matter most, all the expected numbers, advanced numbers, he is having the best season of his career right now, folks. At the age of 27, young in his prime, has yet to hit his peak, untapped potential there. And what I love so much about Mahle is a couple of factors. It's one, when looking at the fastball, the split finger, the slider, the cutter, his 4-pitch mix, his best pitch is his fastball, something that not many starters have unless you are Jacob deGrom, for instance. He has the highest strikeout rate by far with his fastball, has an average heater around 94, 95 miles per hour, has some nice life to it. And I love the fact that he doesn't need to rely on the off-speed stuff to get strikeouts. He can just pump it and really go up and in on hitters, go down the pipe, go down away, paint those corners. He's doing a great job, and he's always thrived when, keep in mind, he's been pitching in arguably the worst park in all baseball outside of Colorado with the Rockies, because you see there in Cincinnati, at home has over 5 ERA, on the road has a 3.8 ERA, and that's only going to get lower as the year goes on. I love Tyler Mahle. I'm a huge advocate for his. I love that the Mets have had continued interest in him, and if they're especially looking for an effective starter right now that can help the heart of this rotation down the stretch and also help them in years going forward with control on his deal and to extend him after next season, Mahle is a key guy to keep an eye on. Definitely will cost you less than a Castillo Montas type, but surely can be effective and maybe, just maybe, can have potential to be even a number 2 in this rotation in the years going forward. Here at number 2, surprise, surprise, we have Tyler Mahle's teammate and 29-year-old stud of an ace and right-hand starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, and Luis Castillo. Castillo, who the Mets just over this past week at the time of recording this have shown a certain level of interest in already, is going to be the key guy to land at this year's trade deadline, is going to more than likely cost the most out of any other starter available, even than the number 1 starter that I have in today's discussion, and that is truly the only reason why I have Castillo at number 2. Between him and the soon-to-be guy discussed, trust. They're really 1A, 1B. But Castillo, the big thing with him, why I think he will be more difficult and maybe a little bit more unlikely than the starter at number 1, is really the relationship the Mets currently have with the Reds right now, when in reality, there are teams that have better prospect pools, have better assets to potentially part with than the Mets, including their crosstown rival, and yes, the Yankees, along with other AL clubs. So, however, Castillo, there's no denying that the Mets, they have to be pursuing him heavily, and I would absolutely jump for joy if they landed him. He has ace potential 1000%, started the year on injury, however, has really gotten in a roll as of late at just over 3 ERA. All the advanced numbers are strong. Castillo's been one of the best starters in all baseball since he arrived in the league a couple years ago for Cincinnati. Again, is not a free agent until 2024, is due for a big arbitration payday after this season, as he's currently on a $7.35 million contract. But what is there not to love about Luis Castillo? He is in the 90th plus percentile through Baseball Savant in his fastball velo. This guy averages 97 miles per hour on the velo, but has great location. And when looking at his further numbers, folks, Castillo with the changeup, the fastball, the sinker, the slider, the changeup and the fastball have been his bread and butter when it comes to the strikeouts. He's been so good with them. The changeup is, in my opinion, if not the best, and arguably one of the best by far. Changeups not just among starters, but truly in all baseball. Gets so much swing and misses on that thing. The sinker, the slider, the sinker has been his worst pitch this year by far, over 300 expected batting average, but you will see that with the guy at number 1 as well, along with some others. I mean, the sinker has been a struggle for pitchers, but that's why important to at least have the forcing and have some strong off-speed stuff. The slider has been strong, and what I love also about Castillo so much is not just the fact that the changeup and the fastball have been so dominant, but that he's balanced with all of his pitches. His 4-pitch mix, he's really been utilizing them, if not exactly to the same degree, then surely close to it. So Castillo, I love the man. I cannot say enough good things about him. I truly hope that the Mets go all in on him, even in a scenario where the rotation is completely healthy and rolling. Yes, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg, but even in a scenario where maybe you eat a contract of a Mike Moustakas, that could help things lower the cost a little bit, along with, I don't know, parting ways with a top prospect. You know, the Reds could use a shortstop prospect that the Mets don't have room for in a Roddy Mauricio, among others, so those are guys to keep in mind with a potential deal. No less, Castillo's going to cost you the most out of all starters, more than likely, which is why I have him at number 2 here. But don't get me wrong, there's no denying that Luis Castillo in this Mets rotation would take them to new heights and potentially make them, yes, a World Series favorite. And last but not least, at number 1, the worst kept secret by far, and that is 29-year-old right-hand starting pitcher for the Oakland Athletics, and yes, Frankie Montas. As I said already, Montas, Castillo, they are 1A, 1B. They are far and away the best pitchers available at this year's trade deadline, will cost you the most by far than anyone else assumably available, and are so similar in a lot of ways. And when I'm looking at pure talent, I do personally think that Luis Castillo is the best player on this list. When you look at all of his advanced numbers, they will tell you that yes, Castillo, for the most part, has been the better pitcher, not to a heavy degree, but has been above Montas. But what stands out so much about Frankie Montas, other than the fact that he's been an absolute stud the past couple of years for the Oakland A's? One, yes, he's going to cost you a lot because he's not a free agent like Castillo until 2024. And yes, teams like the White Sox, like the Yankees and Twins were really close to acquiring him prior to the season, but all those moves fell through, and I do believe a heavy factor was not just the asking price, but also trading with teams that the A's really don't want to trade with, when the Mets, they have Billy Epler, and they have what they did with doing a trade for Chris Bassett, the former Oakland A, during the offseason. So they've already built that connection, and I already think that's a one-up on, say, what the Mets could do with the Reds versus what they can do with Oakland, knowing that they have a better connection on paper over this past half year. To really pair up Bassett with his former teammate, longtime teammate of Montas would be beautiful, but Montas, what stands out so much about him is that arsenal. It's a thing of beauty. You have the fastball, the split finger, the sinker, the slider, the cutter. The fastball is not far off from Castillo at all. It's right around a 96 mile per hour average, has plenty of life. That and his split finger are by far his best pitches, has the highest swing and miss rate, the highest K rate. His worst pitch, just like Castillo, is in fact his sinker. It's hilarious how identical they are. The slider, the cutter, however, they are dominant too, with literally a below 200 opponent batting average. That's the case for all of his pitches outside of, for the most part, that you see there in the sinker. So Montas, when you look at his numbers through Baseball Savant, he's in the elite, especially with that. His chase rate is right around the 90th percentile in baseball. He has done a great job on getting batters to swing and miss and go for pitches, especially that split finger or the slider down and away, doing a phenomenal job. There's no denying that should the Mets go out and land Montas, yes, he's going to cost you a pretty penny, but it may just be a little bit less and have a higher likelihood than someone like Castillo. And even with the Yankees potentially have a better package of display, a better package from the White Sox and others, the A's have an interest to trade him out of the AL into the NL, and that's where the Mets are intriguing. The Mets have players like Dom Smith, JD Davis, that can be fill-ins to an extent at first base / DH, and third base with Matt Olson and Matt Chapman now being gone. They have some prospects that could surely be appealing for an A's team in this retool / rebuild. So for all those factors, I do believe that Frankie Montas potentially has the highest likelihood of landing with the Mets between himself and Luis Castillo, but regardless, they're both going to cost a bit. And one thing that I will say that I will make a note of is that he is pitching in one of, if not the best pitchers ballparks in all of baseball. However, when he's pitching in Oakland right now, he has strong numbers, a 2.38 ERA, but when he's on the road, he has a 4.88 ERA, where Castillo is the complete opposite with a 2.25 ERA on the road when he is in a batter's park for the most part, and then at home, he has, again, not great numbers over 5. So what that tells me is that based on those splits too, is that Castillo has been the better pitcher, all things considered, been pitching better when he's not in that batter's park there in Cincinnati, and Montas has completely thrived and taken full advantage of pitching again in Oakland, a ballpark that is not easy for batters, but I will say is that he has pitched basically almost double the amount of starts already at home versus what he has done away. So that is a factor to take into consideration. No less, Frankie Montas, an absolute stud. I would love him on the Mets. I'm damn excited to see how the Mets are going to approach this team by this year's trade deadline. All right, folks, that'll do it for this video. So make sure to let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Which starter out of the 5 that I discussed today do you believe is either the best fit and or the most feasible option for the Mets by this year's trade deadline? If there's any stars that I didn't discuss that you hope that I did, please let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear it, folks. And one last thing for people that don't know, I have started, yes, my own New York Mets podcast after every Mets series with my co-host Joe Cirillo. You guys can check it out wherever you get your podcast. It's presented by the Bleav Network. It is called, in fact, Bleav in Queens of the podcast name. But the biggest thing of all, folks, is that even though that we're off to a great start, in a couple episodes we will have our third and final co-host, and that is in fact going to be, yes, a former New York Met. You don't want to miss out for the announcement. It's going to be exciting. You're going to see the video content on the channel every single week, along with finding the pod wherever you get your podcast. So links down to all that down below in case you want to check it out, folks. Thank you all so much in advance. And again, if you guys found yourself enjoying this kind of Mets content and you want to see more great Mets content like this, don't hesitate to smash that like and subscribe button. Share this video with your friends, about the notification bell, all those great things. Thank you all so much for the continued support, folks. I'll talk to you guys again real soon. Let's go Mets, baby.